Alright, to jumpstart this one hell of a journey, I used this amount of rectangles for each color for my cardigan. And each rectangle is roughly 6 inches wide and 7 inches long. I'm starting off by doing the front panels first. This will be the front of the cardigan. I made sure none of the same colors were touching. Feel free to play around with that as well. How I'm going to assemble it is by sewing the next door neighbors first, like so. I really like this dark forest green yarn, so I'll be using it to assemble the entire cardigan. I'm just doing a back and forth method to reduce the yarn's visibility from the other side. But if the yarn does show, it's no big deal. As you can see, once flipped, the dark green yarn is pretty well tucked away. And we just repeat the process with the rest of the neighbor rectangles. Once you've got your rows, it's time to attach them together. I'm using the same sewing method during this and for the rest of the video as well. I feel like this method is so much more easier and straightforward. Alright, once done, we do the exact same thing to the second panel and now on to the back of the cardigan. Okay, so I want to say really quickly, because I made the squares like a little bit big, just a squeeze, I decided to make it 4x4. So I kept the length still, 4 squares. But I shortened the width from like the traditional Harry Styles cardigan thing, because I believe that's like 4x6 squares. So yeah, and also I didn't want the cardigan to be super chunky on me. So yeah, so I already like sewed the sides right here. They're like attached. So all I need to do is sew these lines together. You already know the drill, and then you'll have the fat ass back piece. So you'll see that in a bit. Now that this is all done, as you can see, I'm gonna do the rest on top of here. Just stitch it all together and hopefully it comes out good. Here's the end result of the back of the cardigan, and looking mighty sturdy, may I add. And once turned over, it looks so much more clean. For the sleeves, it's pretty straightforward as well. I'll be using the same exact method of sewing by sewing the neighbor rectangles first, then joining the 2 rows together like so. Once that's done, we fold it in half, making sure the ugly side is facing you, and then sew along the edge right here to create pretty much a tube of yarn. I did the exact same thing to the other sleeve, and now you're left with 2 giant tubes, and all that's left to complete the look is the wrist ribbing, like this one right here, to connect to the end of the sleeves. For the ribbing of the wrist, I believe I used a purl stitch like the rest of the cardigan, but I thought, why not show you how I knitted it? For the wrist, I used 7 chains and knit it until it was enough to wrap around my wrist. This had the ribbing be about 2 inches long and 6 inches wide. And just make sure one last time that it does wrap around your wrist. It doesn't have to be exact because knitwear is pretty stretchy. I connected the wrist ribbing like so, but we need 2, so all I did was double thread the needle for durability when starting on the sewing process, and I just kept sewing till everything felt closed and secure. Once done with the cuffs, we still gotta do the hem for the bottom of the cardigan. This hem is also 2 inches long, and the length I made however long needed for the width of the cardigan. But first, I got to assemble the front and back of the cardigan together. So starting with the ugly side of the back panel, I'm going to overlap it with the front panel, with the pretty side facing us. And as you can see, I'll be sewing the bottom 3 rectangles together. The top rectangle needs to be left alone because that's where the sleeve will go later. So right now we will only be focusing on the bottom 3 rectangles. So I open up the front panel, now having both the front and back panels ugly side facing us, and just start attaching them together. And we do the exact same thing to the other side as well. Make sure to stitch with the ugly sides facing you still. Alright, now we need to sew the top of the cardigan together, but only the first 2 rectangles. I'll be leaving the 3rd rectangle completely alone, and just sew along the edge like so. And as always, repeat the same process to the other side of the cardigan. I left a little gap at the top of the cardigan since that's where my neck will be, and now I'll be able to sew the sleeves. The sleeves were a lot easier than I thought. I just made sure the ugly side of the sleeves is facing you, and just pretty much attach it to the side gaps that we created like so. And do this all around the hole, and make sure you're leaving the tunnel open for your arm to come through. And it should look something similar to this. Now for the wrist. I temporarily scrunched the ends of the wrist together with the dark green yarn just so it can be easier to attach the red cuffs. So once scrunched a decent amount, I'll be using red yarn to attach the cuffs to a now smaller hole as you see here. Of course, having the ugly side of the cuffs facing us. Once the cuffs have wrapped around the sleeve hole, I cut off the green yarn and now the sleeve is finally complete. Now onto the long ribbing. I'm just taking the red ribbing and attaching it all around the bottom of the cardigan to give it a nice crest to it, and it came out looking pretty nice. For the front of the cardigan's ribbing, I honestly pat myself on the back for choosing the signature electric blue ribbing that the original Harry Styles cardigan had. It added a crazy pop of color and I love it. And as you may have caught on, the process is all the same. Just attach the blue ribbing onto the edges of the cardigan like so. The blue ribbing is also the same width as the red ribbing, having it be 2 inches as well. This is it all completed. Also, I added a thin red ribbing to the neck area. This part is totally optional. I just thought why not and have it match with the bottom of the cardigan, and I'm happy with how it came out. Finally, we are at the buttons. I chose these wooden buttons to keep the whole earthy theme from the colors going, and my regular green needle is way too big for the buttonhole, so a regular sewing needle and yarn will do just great with this. I eyeballed the placement of the buttons, but they do look pretty even if I do say so myself. The last but most satisfying part is cutting up all the loose yarn, and there was a ton, but this last part generally brought the cardigan to life. This was the longest trust the process moment I've ever had in my entire life, but it was definitely worth it at the end. This cardigan is my favorite clothing item ever, and I'm not even saying that because it took literal blood, sweat, and tears to create. I would 10 out of 10 recommend, and I hope you love how it came out. Alright, I just want to say thank you so much for watching and see you in my next video. Whoa!